Hello, and welcome to the No Bad Questions podcast, where I try to learn in a conversational manner, to break down jargon, and to present the least amount of filtering as possible on a wide array of topics. I hope that you learn something too. If you do and want to support the podcast, you probably already know all the ways that you can do so. You can like, share, subscribe, hit the notifications, but ultimately, and what I hope you choose to do, is watch to the very end. With that, we'll start today's podcast. Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode. My guest this week is Jon Scala. Jon, along with his three partners, has been an investor in healthcare, hospitality, electric vehicle, and real estate for nearly 15 years. They have experienced numerous successful exits and have employed several thousand team members across the organizations in which they've led and or invested. He's a washed-up certified public accountant, an average tennis player, and pretty good at asking questions because, self-admittedly, he doesn't know a lot about much, which I'll ask him about here in a little bit. He thrives when he has the ability to build upon ideas, companies, and people or teams. He is a native West Coaster, but has become an adopted Southerner, as he's been in the South for nearly 20 years, and includes y'all in his normal rhetoric and always attempts to be the first to smile and say hello. I can vouch for Jon's friendliness personally. Jon, thanks for being here with me on No Bad Questions.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So I think most people know what entrepreneurship is, because I like to start these conversations with, so what is XYZ? But today I'm going to say, so why entrepreneurship? Why did you want to start businesses rather than something safer like a career as a CPA?
So that for me is really simple. Two examples. The first example is working for my father at his Hallmark card stores in California in the summers in college. And the rule was if you work half a day, which was 6 hours, which is probably not like in accordance with any labor law, $50 a day. So it's roughly like $8.75 an hour. If you work more than 6 hours, that was a full day, $100. So you always, shot for the moon.
Right.
But when I calculated like the hours, the effort, oh my gosh, the stress, which you wouldn't think stress in a Hallmark card store selling cards and ornaments, but like when you're the delivery boy and trying to wrap gifts when you can't wrap gifts, like it's pretty stressful when you're 19 and 20 years old. So that I figured out like what I was making per hour, and I can't do this. And then post-graduation, I was only a CPA for 5 months. But I calculated what I was billing the client, how many hours I was working, and what I was actually getting. And it was never more than $20 an hour. And so I was just doing the math very quickly. And, I got to go for something myself. If I fall on my face, I'm thankful I had the CPA, which kind of helped me. Basically, that just said, hey, I'll always be able to find a job.
Right.
But I just couldn't do it. So at the age of 23 and 10 months, I became a wantrepreneur,
And what was that first business?
I giggle because it's in the plywood industry. And for those who know me, I don't even own a hammer or a screwdriver. But I do know how to unclog a toilet. I'm like pretty good at that. But essentially we provide JIT, just-in-time inventory, for a lot of furniture manufacturers in North Mississippi. So think Lane Furniture, Ashley Furniture. They would call us to build their furniture frames, their sofa frames, their recliners. And my warehouse, I think the furthest from my client was 21 miles. So we guaranteed 2-hour delivery. So rather than them sitting on inventory, we did. And it's just a lot of back and forth. Actually, pretty fun business.
So that's interesting to me. So because I think what stops a lot of people from starting a business is they feel like they have to know everything about the business. I know I've thought that. Here you are, you're this young guy, we'll say former CPA, and then you're in the inventory logistics furniture business in Mississippi. Like, I can't imagine you had years and years of experience in just-in-time furniture inventory in that market. How did you get into that? I mean, did you buy it from somebody who was selling it? Did you invest with your partners and other people? And did one of them know what the heck they were doing? Like, talk about that, getting into that.
Yeah, really simple. I was dating a girl at the time, and her father had this business for about 10 years. Amazing man. His name is Rob Henson. Probably one of the most generous guys I know. But like a lot of folks, kind of struggled with some vices, and he was going to go back to treatment just to, get healthier and get better. Mm-hmm. And I remember he called me Monday morning. It was in like October of 2006. And he's like, "Hey man, you want to go to Monday Night Football in Atlanta, Steelers, Falcons?" And I was like, "Yeah, but I don't know how we're going to get there. I have to work. Like, I have a big boy job." Right. And he's like, "Don't worry about it. The Georgia Pacific Jet's going to pick us up." And, coming from where I grew up, I've been on a private plane, let alone fancy. So yeah, we flew on the plane to Atlanta, and it was actually Bobby Petrino's last game he ever coached with the Falcons because he quit the next morning. And the Koch brothers had just bought Georgia Pacific. And I didn't get to meet one of the Koch brothers, but I met like one of their right-hand guys. And at halftime in their little suite, he comes up to me and goes, "So, you're the new CFO?" And I'm looking and I can barely spell CFO. And, Rob's kind of like, "Hey, shh, shh." And on the plane ride back, literally on one of those little napkins, he wrote a little number and was like, "I need you to come on board. And like, I need you to come on board as soon as possible." And so I knew very quickly I was leaving accounting because if I ever fell flat on my face, I could go back.
Right.
And so I did that for a year, learned the business pretty well. Rob came back from treatment, and what I had humming, he couldn't help but like try to undo. And so I just asked him, I was like, "I'd like to buy this business from you." And so we structured a deal, thank the Lord, seller finance, because I had no money.
Right.
And a year later, grew the business substantially, a little more than 4 times, and ended up selling it to Georgia Pacific. And so kind of took that, paid off Rob, and had some nickels to try to start something new.
That's awesome. However, it makes me laugh because, I mean, so much of that story hinged on this girl you're dating, right? And the relationship with her family. How much of investment entrepreneurship do you think is luck?
That's a great question. I like to say I've been incredibly lucky, especially growing up single mom and, the whole poverty story. I hear a lot people say luck is when opportunity meets hard work. I don't know what the definition of luck is. I would just consider myself incredibly lucky because I really like people. I was bullied when I was younger just because I was 1, overweight, and 2, really poor. Mm-hmm. And so I've kind of turned that into just how can I just be super nice to everybody I meet, especially as I get older and I get a lot more compassionate for the world and just people in general. And so I use that as like everybody, when they hear a story from me, like, "Oh, here's a Scala story." But my best friend and one of my closest business partners, I literally met at a beach bar in Dubai 12 years ago. You can't make some of this stuff up. I met Charles Barkley on an airplane 8 years ago, and somehow we become really close. So I think it's just, you never know who you're going to meet, when you're going to meet them. And so what I would say is that almost forces you to always be yourself, but always be a listener and a net giver. And I think that's helped me because your comment on you think you have to know everything about anything before you start a business, I'm sure we'll get to that. But my career says I've sold plywood that I knew nothing about, still don't. I've sold washcloths, towels, and sheets from Pakistan and India to United States healthcare and hotels, which I know nothing about. I've sold revenue cycle services, which I've never heard the word revenue cycle before 2014. So I think it just takes like a village in the sense of you have to surround yourself with a team because no one person is Superman or Superwoman. So I think that would be my answer. Luck is like just fate. It's who you meet. Are you a good human? Are they a good human? Is there an opportunity to work together, think together, lean on them?
So perhaps, because I've been thinking about this from some of my other guests, perhaps luck is a combination of, you said earlier what luck is like opportunity is preparedness and timing but what I've been thinking about is I think that a lot of what some folks classify as luck is more about timing and relationships.
Sure.
And so I think, and some of what you just mentioned is just being out there, being a person who people want to be around, who people are comfortable talking to because you're trying to put out, a positive mindset. Do you buy into that idea that relationships trump some of these other factors in terms of just being successful? I mean, they're not going to trump all factors, obviously. You don't know how to, balance a checkbook. You're probably not going to do your finances for your company. You're probably not going to, stay out of the red. But I mean, let me rephrase it. How important do you think are relationships to being successful in the investment and entrepreneurship game?
So I will preface all my statements in that I feel like everybody, they overemphasize relationships are everything, and there's warm fuzzies that go with that. And I'm not trying to minimize that statement at all because I highly value personal and professional relationships. But what I warn people when they get all these warm fuzzies and they go way deep into that is that, to me, relationships get you in the door. They get you a captive audience. It is instant built-in trust, but it does not guarantee anything. And I can give you a few examples. Probably my biggest break in the textile industry, my college roommate's father was on the board of Baycare down in Tampa, St. Pete for about 20 years. And his name is Mr. Bill Tapp, big mentor of mine, amazing family guy. I think he had the second largest firm in the Tampa, St. Pete area before he sold it to CBiz. But just humble, good family man. And that didn't guarantee me business, especially at an organization like Baycare.
Right.
It got me my first meeting, and then myself, my teammates, and more importantly, my value prop had to be compelling enough for them to transact, right? I'll give you a personal example that, let's say you got introduced to your wife through a friend. If you didn't trust your friend's judgment on who he was setting you up with on a blind date, you probably wouldn't have done that, right? So that's an example of like relationships kind of pique your interest, get you a captive audience. There's some trust, but it doesn't get you anything. I think salespeople in any industry, let alone ours, really overemphasize it. Oh, I know that person. They'll buy from me. Well, what are you representing? What's your value prop?
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep, I sure do. And so I get into healthcare administration years ago, and one of the ways I understood what I needed to do to be at least moderately successful in healthcare administration was I had the opportunity to have coffee with the president of the local hospital.
Wow.
And I had that opportunity because he was a neighbor and golfing buddies, with my dad. And so, but he didn't hire me. He pointed me towards grad school. He pointed me towards some career decisions about, getting into management so that I was managing people, so that was a skill I could build. But once I had that, I had a piece of paper that said I knew how to do some healthcare administration and I had some management. He didn't then come around and be like, okay, now let me make you the vice president of the hospital. So it got me good advice. It got me mentorship. It got me on a good path. To your point about it's not guaranteed, right? But it didn't land me some executive job or something like that. But I'm happy that I had that opportunity to learn from that individual some steps I need to take to advance my career, because I think it did. I think
it gets you on the field, but you have to make a play, and that's like, as a competitive person, It's all you can ask for, right?
Right. Well, let's talk competitive person. So that, as well as just the mindset. I mean, you mentioned you were working in high school. So this is a two-part question, just in terms of personality. Not everybody works in high school. Maybe they do other stuff. Maybe they do athletics. Maybe they just don't do anything. And then not everybody's competitive. Some folks are just, hey, it's not how you win. Play the game. Whatever the case might be. How much do you think your combination of personality traits, competitiveness, working younger, that desire to be positive, how much do your personality traits contribute? Because this is something I asked Shay in my first episode, who you know as well. I said, how much is your personality a key to your success? So I got the same question for you. How much is personality a factor in your success?
Gosh, I feel like we need to poll the audience on that, right? I'm not independent in anything I'm about to say. But my mind chatter on that, I probably had a chip on my shoulder growing up just because I was picked on for being poor and overweight. And so I feel like I had to compensate for that. And part of how I compensated was I was really good at school. Like, I was the guy in 5th and 6th grade where the teacher's like, I'm taking half the day off and John's going to run the math class. You stand behind each person with a flashcard because I'm not allowed to play because I'm going to win all the blow pops, right? So I probably overcompensated with that because school came easy to me. And then sports was probably the best thing for me because once I became decent at sports, you earn like friends, respect, commonality. Right. Sports really bring people together. I would say I'm not a sore loser. I would say you learn the most when you lose, but winning is really fun. Like, really fun. Right. We were chatting before, even something as dumb as a Peloton, it is my nemesis because I cannot go half pace on that. And I will shout out again, Lee Rivas, I'll call you out. He's CloudMed CEO. We've done it one time, and my male ego, I crush Lee, but I challenge him anytime. It's an example of I can't just have a casual morning ride, burn a couple hundred calories. I'm looking at that scoreboard and I'm going to destroy them and myself.
Right.
Which is why I can do it twice a week. So I think from a personality standpoint, because I don't feel personally that I'm that intelligent, and that's not a humble statement, it's kind of how I feel. I feel like I'm forced to listen because I don't feel I'm a subject matter in anything. And I think through listening, one, I think people appreciate, but two, it helps you figure out where you can actually add value for one another, whether it's an introduction, whether it's coming together as part of a team, whether it's just continuing to spitball an idea. So I think that would be my answer, is that because I don't feel like I'm overly intelligent, I've always forced myself to listen really well. And that's a lost art, brother.
I agree with that. I definitely think that just being quiet and listening to what the other person has to say, and not only being quiet, but actually listening, right? Absorbing the noises that come out of their mouth that make up words, letting them go in and actually get into your headspace, and in particular, the empathy part of that.
Away, right?
Right. Yeah. Put the phone away. Put the distractions away. Absolutely. But now I want to ask, in the intro you sent me, and then you've mentioned it or alluded to it a couple of times, plus you just said about the intelligence factor. You said you feel like you don't know a whole lot about much, and yet you have this breadth of successful entrepreneurship and investment experience. I think if you're right that you don't know a lot and aren't that intelligent, that's a really hopeful message for a lot of folks out there who maybe aren't gifted with being rocket scientists. But I also feel like, I mean, we've chatted a few times. I just feel like to be so successful, you have to know something. I mean, so do you feel like some of these factors we've talked about, listening, relationships, communication, understanding and building value, are those what it's about more than just being a rock star with a bunch of intellectual horsepower and knowledge about any individual business? Do you really feel like those are more of the keys? And if so, what could the average person listening do to get better at those things? Because those are skills you can develop, I think.
I think it depends what you want to do. So for me, I've always wanted to build things. Again, not independent in this statement, and I would be really interested if you polled 100 people, what would be the response? But it's my hope that I don't have an ego. And because of that, I'm not a greedy person because, again, I grew up really poor. I also know I'm one human. I can only do so much. So that's like a scalability issue, right?
Right.
So if I were to say my superpower is through listening and I guess just like a gut feel or a vibe, I've been able to identify others' superpowers and put them in a position to make a play where like this business, whatever we invest in, can scale. Because I'm thinking of one person, I won't say her name, but gosh, I hired her right out of school and she just lacked a lot of confidence, like personal and professional. And it's like a good big brother or dad moment to see her gain so much confidence in both parts of her life.
Yeah.
And there was like a track that I really wanted her to go down. And part of that included her moving to Phoenix a few years ago. And I kept feeling resistance. And there was a bunch of us that wanted her to do this because others had done it. And she would, have all these accolades. And I thought she'd be really great at it. But my learning lesson there was that it has nothing to do with what I want. If they don't want it for them, they're not going to be happy.
Right.
If they're not happy, they can't unleash their superpower. And that's what any organization needs. It needs everybody from the team, unleashing their superpower. They are the best at this and this only perhaps, right? And everybody's rowing in the right direction. I know that sounds very like spiritual and woo-woo. And I'm rambling per usual, but I would say if you want to build something great and of scale, like you need other people. Rule number one. So as an entrepreneur, get past yourself, you need other people. So whether that's diluting your equity, if you want to call it that, whether it's identifying, okay, my first 10 hires, here's what they need. I need to go get the best with these 10 skills. That's really important. I know a lot of entrepreneurs that are either single entrepreneurs or like sub 20 people that I'm thinking of one investment where we lost our tail, which again, you learn the most when you lose. I currently have 2 of them. I hope it never gets to 10, but there will be more than 2, where we had positioned the business to sell. Amazing return for everybody, including the employees. We gave 20% of the company away. And 4 days before close, the founder, who I've known for 6 years and really helped personally and professionally, said, I'm not going to do this. I love being the boss. And it just broke our hearts. We're like, time out. You love being the boss and you're not ready to not be the boss, but this is, financial independence for so many humans.
Right.
Yeah, John, I'm sorry. I like being the boss. Those are big downfalls for any entrepreneur starting in the middle or finishing your race. Like without the company, you don't have a job, your colleagues don't have a job, and the company is always bigger than you.
Right.
I can think of one funny example on that and we'll move on. I'm sorry to ramble.
Yeah, no, you're fine.
Have you ever seen the movie The Jerk with Steve Martin?
It's been a long time, but yes, I have.
Okay. Billy the Kid in that movie, he's been a friend of mine since I was 21. His name is John Lecter. Okay. I brought him on to do the diligence on the Health Check acquisition and as our CTO and owner at Health Check. And everything was great. Our first year was tough, but we got through it. And we had a couple conversations where he wanted additional responsibilities, possible compensation, et cetera. And so we're like, okay, let's take a look at this. Let's do an analysis and let's figure it out. And so through all of that, I found out from my teammates that this guy became just a big meanie, like total jerk. And that was an unintentional joke, actually. But I went kind of rogue on a couple conference calls with some of our vendor partners and also just internally, and they were right. Like when the tide started shifting and we started, having some success, I mean, this guy's ego was insane. And so I remember we met with him a couple weeks later on a Friday, and I said, hey, shooting you straight here, like we did a thorough analysis. You did a great job. Like we owe a lot of credit to your efforts and to your vision. But I got to tell you, like today's your last day, man. And he's like, what are you talking about? And, you've probably heard of the no asshole rule, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was actually the last sentence in our handbook, before we got, huge and corporate and everything. But, I'll tell you, probably the biggest change and momentum build for Health Check from 2014 to 17 was actually, that exit of a really good friend of mine, a C-suite and an owner. He owned part of the company. And I remember the following Monday, we talked to the company and they were just stunned that I would, fire a friend, C-suite, an owner, and myself and Dr. Koppel kind of sat the team down and we're like, look, no one person, including myself, Dr. K, anybody in this room is bigger than the company. Because without the company, none of us have jobs. We can't serve our clients.
Right.
And so while that put a huge strain on our friendship for a few years, and we are incredible friends now, again, so it's nice.
Yeah, it's good to recover that.
Yeah, but I really think that was a big deal for us. And so I would also give that piece of advice to entrepreneurs. Don't let that be you. And don't let that be your college buddy, your neighbor, your best friend, because without the company, you don't have anything.
Yeah. Do you have any advice for people who might be thinking of undertaking working with friends or family? Because that's actually a good point. I've heard so much about don't do that, right? Because you may end up losing a friend, not losing a family member, but becoming estranged from a family member if the business doesn't go well, or if you have a moment like that where you need to separate either you or them from the business. Do you have any advice? Because you've done a lot of, over the years, either they started as friends or they've become friends, your investor partners over the years. And that story that you just shared is exactly that. I mean, so do you have any advice besides the business is bigger than the individual? Do you have any other, I'll call it tactical advice of working with friends and family?
Yeah, I have two thoughts. My first thought is accountability. So as long as everybody's clear on, okay, this is David's role and this is why you're here and you are the best in any of our selection and this is, we need this from you. And then inversely, hey, Jon, like, here's your superpower. Here's what we need from you. Here's your job duties. Here's your responsibilities. And both folks are, kind of holding each other accountable because they understand how your work affects ours, affects the organization. I think that's good. Just as if you were, in a Bible study and you had an accountability partner, or working out and you had an accountability partner. I think accountability partners are really important in life. So I think that's key. And the other thing I'm thinking about is, while we haven't had a ton of losses so far, that doesn't mean the roller coaster's always been high.
Right.
Because I will tell you, the roller coaster of an entrepreneur, the lows are hard. I could even use the word like devastating sometimes. I mean, until you've done it, you don't know just the mind chaos that goes in your inner voice. And the highs are sweeter than anything I can explain. Okay. But I would say you have to enjoy the ride, whether you're on the highs or the lows, but you'll know really quickly when you go through the lows, whether it's a friend, family member, or just a coworker, how they manage when the sky is falling is everything. And I'm thinking of two instances in investments where unplanned, we had to pour in large sums of money. And we didn't know when the sky would stop falling.
Right.
But I will tell you, our core group never raised our voices, never yelled, never pointed fingers. It was always laser focused on the people, the clients, the business, and what are we doing? So I feel really fortunate for that because I've heard a lot of, I'm in a masterminds group with this guy named Tommy Breedlove, and it's 25 guys that are all like C-suite or entrepreneurs. And I've heard some horrible stories from them. I haven't experienced that. So I would say, if you're going to do business with friends and family, think about whenever there was a time where you had to triumph through something and how your relationship managed through that, and then have a gut check of can that apply to business? Because money is weird.
That's true.
Money is really weird, and money can make people do weird things. So if you have the benefit of history there, you have the benefit of making some actually really good choices on the front end. I never had the history. It's just, maybe it's just how we respected each other and understood, like, hey, we take on risk every day, right?
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that particularly looking at other stressful situations that you may have been through with those friends or family members you're thinking about going into business with is a really a tactic that people could easily adapt to their life if they're thinking about going into business. So that's a great one, Jon. You talked about a couple scenarios where you've had some downs or had to, pump money into a business or whatever. What's been your worst investment so far?
I think the best money I ever lost, I was 27 years old, and I met this man. So again, because I never thought I was smart and my career wasn't Ivy League undergrad or Fortune 100, I was a little insecure about others who did go to Ivy League or did go to Fortune 100. And so I got introduced to this man who was an executive vice president at Qualcomm, which is one of the larger employers in San Diego, my hometown. And he had this technology in the augmented reality space. So if I'm doing some math here, this is like 2011.
Oh, wow.
Like that. And I'm sitting at a baseball game in San Diego, and the easiest way for him to explain it to me, he was like, hey, I'm going to go get us a beer. And in my head, I'm like, great, because I bought the ticket, so I appreciate you buying the first round beers. He's like, how about a Bud Light? And I like craft brew, but I'm not going to be rude. I'm like, all right, cool.
Sure.
So he pulls out his phone, puts the camera on, and puts on a Bud Light banner in right field. And all of a sudden on his phone, a Bud Light commercial came to life on the phone. It showed you everywhere in the stadium you could buy Bud Light, and everywhere within 5 blocks who had Bud Light and what specials were. And so I was like, wow, this technology is insane. And here's this man who ran a $2 billion R&D budget, executive vice president of a big tech company. Like, I'm going to invest in Apple, right?
Right.
And so I got a bunch of my buddies. And at the time, we put in basically like kind of all we had almost. And we were just relied on this product, right? Well, let me tell you this. We lost everything. Everything in just under 2 years. And so my biggest takeaway from that I would tell everybody, and I try to keep myself disciplined when I invest as well, is you never invest solely in the product or the service, ever. It's always about who is the management team, because it could be the greatest idea ever, which I thought it was. I was like, wow, first off, I'm probably an idiot because I don't know technology in general. And I'm sure there were dozens of other companies that did that. I was just stunned, like, wow, I can buy Bud Light. But for me, you have to look at the team's ability to execute upon the idea. So again, you don't love to lose, but I try to learn the most when you lose. And so that's my takeaway. Another one that we thought was bad for about a year, but turned out to be really good for everybody, is it's in like the hospitality space, kind of like environmental services, where, I mean, millions of dollars we had to pump in, and we didn't know when it would stop. And we don't know this business. We had to really, truly rely on our operations team. And it was like Mayday, even for them. And they'd had 20 and 30-year careers, and they really weren't sure when or if it would end. But again, just kind of stayed the course, dug in deeper, got a lot more details, got more involved with the clients. And it was really a good exercise in solving a puzzle when we weren't expecting to. So I think that's another thing too that I'm really thankful for my partners. Like, we are willing to scrub toilets, to do any job if needed, because without the company, we have nothing, right? So unexpectedly, not only did we inject capital, but we really injected like ourselves in deeper analysis to help our leaders make better decisions. Um, yeah, so I would say losing all of our money at 27. Um, the learning lesson is it's all about the people. And that also sounds very woo-woo, but I think it really is the winning recipe.
It makes sense. I mean, if it wasn't important, there wouldn't be a million different leadership books and leadership courses and leadership seminars and motivational speakers who talk about leadership. And so, I mean, if it wasn't important, now, is it the only factor? Probably not. I think that's, as we're talking through all of this, I think one of the biggest things that sort of a subtext that I'm picking up is how many factors really go into success in the entrepreneurship and investment universe. I mean, I feel like I already knew that a little bit, but I think it's talking about it with you in this way today is making it more pronounced for me. And what is surprising is how much it's not necessarily operational knowledge of the given business that you're starting or buying or investing in. So, well, actually, so let me ask that. Do you think if it's starting a business versus buying a business, does that change? Does that change how much you have to know the business?
Man, good question. Before I answer that, I'm just thinking I've started 2 companies.
Okay.
And as I say that, I like sigh and I think about what we were talking about earlier. My hair is running further and further back to my head. I'm getting wrinkles. It's hard. It's really hard. And I don't know if I would say I'm advising folks to start versus buy. I think it's case by case. The benefits of buying a business is hopefully you have clients, you have a story, and you have some cash flow and revenue, which helps, versus no story, no clients, no revenue, and it's going to be a minute until you get all of those, right? So I think it's a case-by-case basis. I think for your first one, if you're dabbling in as an entrepreneur, I think most people are probably going to start a business because they're going to want to make it their baby. My advice there is that's okay as long as you have line of sight to revenue and cash flow. Because I think humans, whether personal or professional, when you're undercapitalized, you make really dumb decisions because you kind of have to, right?
Right.
And you'll chase things you shouldn't chase versus what your core mission is. So I think that's a deeper conversation, but man, it is a serious, serious thought. And so I think your question was, do you have to know more if you start a business? I would say that decision, like that logic tree, is probably agnostic, because if you have somebody who knows that business, so that'll be like your ops, your subject matter expert, I think you could start or buy, right?
Okay.
I think if you're the entrepreneur, when I think of the entrepreneur, I think about more of like the crazy creative, the vision, here's where we're going and here's why we're going to go there. And then that person should probably hire a ton of SMEs. That should be, you should be able to understand that message, but that entrepreneur should be able to guide the ship and guide the business. Doesn't necessarily have to know everything about the business.
Okay. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense, actually.
Well, let's give an example here. Revenue cycle. I'd never heard of that word till 2014. And thank God we had some amazing people who really knew that business, because people internally gave me a lot of grace. But look, people like yourself, I can talk a little more intelligently about rev cycle today, but, I think you've probably given me grace without even, going too deep and just saying, hey, I kind of know where Jon's knowledge is and where it's not, but like I have an army of folks that can definitely be on your level.
Right.
And it's really more my job to like listen to you and like where you want to go and how we can help, and then connect people. Right. Right.
Well, and for those who don't know, and actually maybe we can talk about this, John and his partners recently sold or merged. John, would you classify it your business called CloudMed to a much larger revenue cycle business in the healthcare space? So that's kind of where John's talking about from 2014 to today, this enormous growth of this business, CloudMed, and really successful merger, sale, whatever, here in the last year. And congrats on that, by the way. But just for any listener that may not be familiar with that, but let's talk about merger. I mean, so I think a lot of businesses, a lot of entrepreneurs start a business and like that's what they want to do. Like your story about the guy who I want to be the boss. I want to own. There's a pride, I would guess, in running your own business and owning your own business. And there's plenty of family businesses that do that, multi-generational and so forth. But there's a lot of other business owners who it's like we want to start something, we want to grow it, and then we want out. You called it an exit. That's probably a jargon term, but ultimately sell or merge with somebody else, right? Am I understanding that correctly? So what is that like, that process of selling? You've built this business, you've spent, blood, sweat, tears, money, time into it. What is it like both practically and what does it feel like? You talked about the high highs of success in investment are great. What is all that like, both, like I said, the practical and just the emotional feeling of that?
I think selling a business for your first time is going to be very emotional. And it'll be emotional from the sense of like, we built this together. I'm not going to be able to have the same decision-making abilities, or am I ready? Those are tough. Mm-hmm. And I've gone through that. I think as we've gone through more, what comes to mind in businesses I've been involved in, I wrote a paper my sophomore year in college, and it essentially is around the concept of reaching your level of incompetence. And so I think, let's talk about coaching. There's a lot of great defensive or offensive coordinators that get a head coaching job and they totally fail. Same thing in business. A lot of CFOs or vice presidents get a C-suite job and they totally fail.
Right.
For me, I think I know my abilities from both a revenue perspective and just scale of the business of okay, I think I can handle this and I know where I cannot. Okay. So that's where I think about exiting the business. Where can we be part of something bigger with a bigger and greater mission with better leadership, right? Again, taking yourself out of the equation. But from an emotional standpoint, if you pick the right organization to sell to that has a bigger, greater mission for your clients and the people, that is a powerful feeling. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's where the leadership and our board at CloudMed made that decision as we moved along the transaction with R1, is that together our mission is greater. And I think it's right place, right time for the industry, in this case, healthcare, in this case, revenue cycle, is that CloudMed had an amazing run. I think we grew incredibly quick, and it'll be 5 years this November 1st. Kind of wild to think about. But I don't think it was just an exit, hey, see you later, clients, colleagues. I think it's a bigger, greater mission that we're all bought into. I'm still here. I'm a W-2 every other Friday. I get a paycheck. I still get to work with clients that I really enjoy. So when I think about an exit, it's either strategic or financial. I haven't had a true financial exit yet. Where hey, I just want money and money only. This is all I care about. I don't really know if that's in the DNA of myself and my partners. We're kind of all about, okay, we can take it to a certain point, whether it's our ability or risk tolerance. We kind of building things that are going to keep going forward. Mm-hmm. And we don't have to lead it. And I would argue we probably shouldn't. We've never done it. So why do we want a huge asset that we, took a lot of risk for, built with a lot of teammates, if we've never done it? You should always want to kind of hire the best talent out there. in my opinion.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. But one of the things that you're mentioning about strategic versus financial exits to owning a business, one of the things that strikes me is you may be uncommon in your focus on a bigger mission for your client, a bigger opportunity for your employees. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's kind of what I want you to tell me about is that it seems to me that you have a lot of what the Jesuits at Xavier taught me is servant-minded leadership, right? And I feel like you have a lot of that in you. Do you feel like you're somewhat unique? You've encountered and brushed shoulders with a lot of investors now over the years. Private equity folks, venture capital folks. Do you feel like your approach with that focus on mission and servant-mindedness is somewhat unique?
I'm laughing because I would say yes. But I understand why VC and PE, which are definitely different, are really just show me the money. What does the spreadsheet look like? Because that really is their job. And it's their job because they're managing a lot of institutional money. I mean, retirement money, pension money, teacher, firefighter, cop money. And so there's a big part of me that says they should, period. It's a spreadsheet, it's numbers,
right.
It's return, because a lot of people rely on that. It's hard for me because I've always been involved in the organizations, not just in the ivory tower. Where's my spreadsheet?
Right.
So plus I am a little more of the emotional. I'm probably the most emotional of my three partners. For sure I am. Definitely the most emotionally invested in the people because I'm like the closest. But it also, because of that, it's why I need my partners for balance. So I don't let emotions cloud what's best for the organization at all times. Right. But I'm also laughing because there's a guy in the PE world that I'm really close friends with and probably the most successful guy I know purely in healthcare investing. The guy's vision is unbelievable, and we actually owe his vision and credit to what CloudMed is today, in addition to other multi-billion-dollar companies. I'm laughing because I warn people when you meet him, give him more than 90 seconds because you judge him in the first 90 seconds. I don't have to say anything to him. I can do a couple things and just look at him, and I can get him to laugh. But he's the guy that's probably going to have 2 more buttons unbuttoned. He's going to look very high fashion. I mean, he's a good looking man. But he kind of gives the typical Wall Street bravado. The guy is oozing machismo. Okay. But if you give him 91 seconds, you will quickly realize he's a human like all of us. He has his insecurities and he's open about them. And he really is that creative brain that just like wants to verbalize his ideas and then like have you help him focus them. I'm very much like that, and I never want to put myself in the same paragraph as this man. But it's a real comforting feeling to know that I have some attributes to people who have been, Ivy League trained and have played in that space. But for entrepreneurs, I would quickly add here, big difference between VC and PE. VC is when you need money that you cannot get from friends or family earlier. It is going to be the most expensive money you ever take if you're actually successful. Whereas PE, you need to be a little bit more of a mature company, so not a startup. You probably need to have been in business at least a year, have certain milestones and inflections hit, whether it's number of customers, revenue, EBITDA, funny word. So my advice to early entrepreneurs, run from VC, because if you're actually ever successful at what you want to do, it's going to hurt. Try to raise with friends and family, beg and plead, figure out a way, build a network where if people trust you or maybe your track record somewhere else, try to go that route first. VC's tough. Private equity is probably going to be your best friend because if you partner with the right one, their ability to scale will always be bigger than yours. They have the capital, the risk tolerance, but more importantly, the experience to help you scale greater than yourself. So I look at New Mountain Capital has been the one that we've worked with, and I mean, their scoreboard is for real. And my personal experience with them, I don't know if they've ever told us no to like a crazy growth idea.
Oh, wow.
And if anything, they're like, yes, and the and is like sending some of their people who, again, are Ivy League educated, have been in certain industries to help us. Literally, they'll like kind of join our team. So I've had a great experience with private equity. I've never had an experience with VC, but I have friends who have a lot of sob stories. So,
well, I appreciate you talking about that, because I know for me, I don't fully understand the difference. I don't live in your world to understand the difference between venture capital and PE, and so that sort of warning between the two is interesting. What do you think, besides perhaps mixing the two up, what do you think is the most common thing that like the average person gets wrong about those two different methods of investment or funding sources and you see stuff on the news or you read the Wall Street Journal and it's venture capital firm X buys this business or this business sells. I mean, what do you think the average person gets wrong the most, besides potentially just mixing them up in the first place?
Thinking of one person specifically that a lot of people probably don't know him by his name, but Alexis Ohanian, who's actually Serena Williams' husband. It's a crazy story. My college roommate was Serena's coach for 4 years. Excuse me. So I got to kind of get to know that vibe, that group, that family. And I remember we were at the Australian Open and I kind of got to spend some time with him and learn a lot from him. And so he was a co-founder at Reddit.com, the sixth most visited website in the world. So you would think this guy would be worth hundreds of millions, if not billions.
Right.
At the time, he was worth $6 million. And look, that is a lot of money. I'm not talking, I'm not trying to minimize that. Right. But it's now his mission to talk to early entrepreneurs about to not do the things he did. Some of the things he did was he ruined his cap table too early. He was too focused on raising money versus running his business. He was too early on who he's bringing on as an investor from naming perspective versus actual, like, what does he own? What does his team own? Where is his business going? I'm thinking of another individual kind of in the rev cycle space that I have warned him a few times, do not be distracted by raising money because there is so much money out there, especially VC money. They can just throw $1 on something, and if it turns into 50, great. If it doesn't, who cares? They're going to make 50 bets. Right. But raising money is not operating your business. It's incredibly distracting. We all have read articles recently about a company in the automation space. It's in a martini, hint, hint, that raised hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, had a $4 billion valuation, that it's crashing. Right. And
a lot of layoffs recently.
Yeah, it's a bummer because there's actually some really talented people there. I think, unfortunately, I don't personally know all of their leadership, but it's my gut that they got a little distracted, intoxicated by that, all of the raising, the valuations, but like, was that running your core business? Was it making your product or solution better? Was it developing your people? Was it adding value for your client? Probably not. So I would say for the average entrepreneur, you probably aren't going to have something where you need VC. It's going to be your money, your friends and family. I would strongly advise doing that for a period of time, but understanding what your metrics you need to start talking to PE and working towards that and as quick as you can. So if you need 20 clients and 5 million in revenue and $1 million in earnings, great. Here's your playbook. I'm marching towards it. Right. And when you hit that inflection point, then it's kind of a gut check with you, your partners, your teammates on, are we the right people and do we have the right amount of capital to go to the next level? If the answer is yeah, rock on. Form your next playbook. I have to get to 15 million in revenue and 5 million in profit and 50 customers. Cool. If not, start talking to private equity. Yeah. I think it's always important to have a roadmap. You need a reason to wake up for the day and look at your Microsoft calendar. Here's what I'm doing today, right?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I mean, I live off my calendar, and I'm not even, an entrepreneur, but, like doing this podcast, I've broken out calendars to try to make sure I'm not conflicting with my day job, things like that. And, I love that about having a roadmap or a playbook, depending on which metaphor, you want to use or whatever. Jon, one thing all the time when I'm talking to you, you're in different geography. And so one of the things I'm sitting here wondering as we're talking about buying businesses, starting businesses, advice for entrepreneurs. And I know that for workers, people who want to be employees, want the stability of a paycheck, it's long-standing advice that sometimes you have to go where the jobs are. Yeah. Do you think that that's true for somebody who wants to be an entrepreneur? Do you have to go where the businesses are? You mentioned your first business was in Mississippi, but you're from San Diego. Now you're, often in Georgia. I mean, you mentioned Tampa and you had a business. Do you have to go to where the businesses are, or can you make it, if somebody's like, no, I like where I live, my family's here, whatever, can you do it local? Or is that an it depends kind of answer?
So what's going through my head, Lee Rivas has this term mind chatter, so I've totally abused that. But my mind chatter says, I'm going to change that context of the question, because I've been asked recently, can you have it all, personal life and professional life? Because that's kind of
getting ahead of me. That was I was going to ask you that in a minute, but yeah, go ahead.
I'm a fortune teller here. I can read your palm. I think when you make the decision to be an entrepreneur, it has to consume you. It has to consume you early on. So I would say whether you are going to open up a coffee shop and your customer would be a consumer, right, versus a business, you need to be hands-on in that store, operating it every day. The employees see you. The customers, most importantly, see you, and you get to know them. You can't do it from your house. You can't do it from Columbus, Ohio, and have a coffee shop in Tampa. That's a recipe for disaster. Okay.
Right.
So I absolutely think you need to be on site, intimate with your colleagues and your customers, no questions asked.
Okay.
When you have the opportunity to have multiple investments or whatnot, it goes all the way back to the team and then what's your role. So for example, we have an electric vehicle company we're investors in. Totally rad company, by the way. My role is just an investor. And then when Rob, our CEO, needs CFO type help, I'm interim CFO because the company isn't mature enough yet to have a true full-time CFO. Great. Right. I don't need to be in Arizona every day.
Right.
So as long as you know your role, I think that's dependent. But as an early entrepreneur, you're cannonballing. You are so deep. It's really important.
That makes sense. And I appreciate you, weighing in on that. So let's wrap up, and I'll figure out a different way to phrase "Can you have it all?" Since I was going to ask, "Can you have it all?" So let me ask you this: you and I are pretty close to the same age. I went the employee track. I was risk averse, and I'm fine with that. I got into healthcare management and leadership, but I've got the family. I've got the kids, and I know that you don't right now, or we'll say yet. Was that a choice? Was that balance of you can't have it all, and so you were focused on business? Do you, or AKA, are there elements you feel like thus far you've missed out on?
Yeah, deep question, and I feel like this should involve a couch and $250 an hour, maybe a glass of wine. For me, my answer is just going to be really honest. I think in the moment, I didn't think I could have it all. I think I was running scared and running very, very fast. I mean, David, I feel like for years, I knew my hotel room from the night before, but my body really didn't know what time zone or city I was on, but I knew what time my flight left that day. I saw my name on a lot of notes at the bank. So I'll call that, part of the running scared and running quick. I have been fortunate to really date some amazing women, amazing high quality humans. that I could have done things differently at different times looking back. But in the heat of the moment, I'm like, I don't know, and I would say professional definitely kind of took priority for sure, subconsciously. But as like, this is a topic in our masterminds group a lot. Can you have both? I think it depends on your age that you become an entrepreneur, because your age typically has like a direct correlation to your life responsibilities, right? You have 3 kids that you have to, can you live in a garage for a year? Can you eat rice and beans? And also like, what are you willing to sacrifice? And then can your partner really support that?
Right.
And so for me, I think there's some things I could have done differently. But when you're in the heat of the battle, I mean, again, I ran really hard and ran scared. So I think there's got to be a way. Like, I'm an optimist. Yeah, I think there has to be a way. Your partner has to just be bought in to the commitment, the responsibilities, and that, he or she really needs to be that shoulder to lean on, because you're going to have a lot of lows. But that he or she really needs to be that person staring across from the table from you, celebrating every freaking milestone, and keep that encouragement going. So I'm going to say it is possible. I didn't execute on that, but I'm optimistic for the future.
Well, I think that's fair enough, and I appreciate you weighing in on that, because I think that's something that a lot of people wonder. And I also, frankly, I think that, I don't know if it's just the keeping up with the Joneses mindset of social media and so forth that makes people feel like, oh, you can have everything. And it's like, well, even if the answer is you can, it's a ton of work. I mean, you got to put the work in, right? So
yeah, I got off social media like 5 or 6 years ago. I would recommend that to anybody, whether you're like a professional athlete, an entrepreneur. I mean, just get rid of the noise and distraction. That is not reality. You need to not get sucked in by any of that as best as you can. That would be a major piece of advice. Get off it all.
Well, I love it. On that note, we'll wrap up. Jon, thank you for being here, talking about business, investment, entrepreneurship, and finally getting off social media, which, by the way, if folks don't think advice from a successful entrepreneur is enough, go and listen to episode 2 about cybersecurity. So thank you very much, Jon, for being here on No Bad Questions.
Cool, brother. Thank you.
Bye now.